Hi, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Lukman. I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C. And for those of you who are watching me over at We Are the Media, hello, thank you for joining me. So, today, I'm sure all of you have been well versed in the controversy that has been going on um, in the past week in the online, the social media progressive circles. And as my husband and I said on our show over on Coffee Current Events and Politics in Lukman Nation this past Saturday, um, we're not going to keep talking about this because for Black people, we've been talking about this almost literally all our lives. But I recognize that there is an element to this issue that a lot of people probably don't understand, and that's partially because a lot of people don't have all the facts. But I want to make something very clear. I'm not having this conversation with you all because I have any personal animus against anyone. I'm having this conversation with you all because our future as progressives, our political future, our future as a movement is at stake right now. And I'm very concerned about where we're going to go and how far we can go because we can't even agree on some basic ground rules in the progressive movement. And this incident has proven that to me. I was concerned before this about some things that I had seen, but I keep my concerns in check because I can actually be kind of a pessimist and worry too much, and that can be very detrimental to my own well-being, but also to my activism. Because if you get too pessimistic, you just give up and you say, I just don't want to do anything else. And I don't want to do that. So even though I have been very concerned about some things that I've seen in the progressive movement, I still figured, look, we can get something going here until this week. And I saw that for some people who are very influential in the progressive circles, in the online progressive circles, um, their priorities seem to be a little odd, a little off, because it bothers me that we progressives, when it comes to politicians, we demand integrity from them. We demand honesty. We demand accountability and we demand humility from them. And we should. We're supposed to. Politics and politicians and our government is supposed to work for us. We elect them to represent us, and we're supposed to hold them to that standard. But it's interesting to note that we're so adamant about politicians living up to these values. And I've seen over the past few months people who will absolutely excoriate politicians like Bernie Sanders, who many of us came into this movement behind. Many, well, I should say, many of you, because many people have been working toward progressive policies in this country for quite a while. And many of us have been involved in activism and some type of political or social activity toward that end long before Bernie Sanders came along. But it's great that a lot of people were woken up by Bernie Sanders. I think that's wonderful because it had to take someone to get people to realize what's really wrong in this country and that things are really wrong. And I'm seeing people who are very upset that Bernie Sanders, people are saying that he's sheepdogging for the Democrats now. People are saying that he's a traitor, that he sold us out. Now I don't have a value judgment on how people feel about those things. I'm not here to tell you whether those things are true or not. I'm not here to agree or disagree with you on them. I'm just saying I see that this is what progressives do. This is how we respond when we feel that politicians aren't living up to the values that we say we espouse as progressives. And I'm seeing this repeated over and over again. People don't like Nina Turner because she's still in the Democratic Party, so she's not purely progressive as far as they're concerned. People don't like Ossoff, who just lost the race, and I think it was Ohio, because he's not purely progressive. He's still a Democrat, an establishment sort of Democrat. So I see this willingness and this ability, really, for progressives to hold a hard line on integrity for politicians. But this past week, I saw that line fudge, I saw it move, I saw it be completely erased by some of the same progressive voices who have so much influence in this movement. And it was, that line was moved, it was fudged, and it was erased for a really, really problematic and to be quite honest, dangerous reason. Because people really like their personalities, their progressive online personalities. And it is still very true that a lot of white progressives do not like talking about racism in an honest way. For those of us black activists, um, that's disappointing. And this past week has been frustrating and it's been hurtful. It's been eye opening. But we also know how dangerous this type of cognitive dissonance, this type of dismissal of our concerns can be, because we've seen it over and over again how this type of betrayal, this type of characterization of black people as aggressive or angry or divisive or hateful can cost us our lives. So before I go any further, I want to make sure I get the facts straight in this issue. I'm not trying to rehash anything. I want to make very clear to you what the problem really is. Because we started with the United National Anti-War Coalition Conference in Richmond, Virginia last weekend. I attended on Sunday. I couldn't attend the rest of the weekend. Attended the plenary session, and it was a great day on Sunday. It was a full day full of great discussions from the panel. I got to interview some wonderful people. We got to go down to Shockoe Bottom, which is the slave burial ground and Lumpkins jail, which my ancestors, my direct ancestors, probably came through, more than likely, since my family's never lived anywhere else than other than Greenville County, Virginia. So it was a wonderful day, and I come home, and 2 days later, a couple of people actually tagged me in a Facebook post of a video, and they're saying, Jackie, you need to watch this. I thought you went to this conference, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, fine. And I don't think I don't remember actually watching the video live. I don't think I did, or maybe I caught a little piece of it, but I saw that it was Claudia Stauber, and I just saw her at the conference on Sunday. I talked to her. We had attended other events before, and I thought, hey, maybe we could get together later on today. I actually had a couple of conversations with Claudia. I tried to speak to Debbie, wasn't successful. But I was surprised when I was watching this video at the things that Claudia was saying. Because she was saying that a session during the conference was closed to only black people. She wasn't allowed in. And then when she insisted that she go in, she wasn't allowed to live stream, but a black lady was allowed to live stream. She felt that that was racist. As a matter of fact, she didn't feel that was racist. She adamantly declared that that was racist, and she was not allowed to stream because of the color of her skin. That's what she said in her video. And as I am watching her, listening to her say these things, I'm really shocked because I just seen her Sunday. And she hadn't said anything to me about being upset. Not that she had to, mind you. She didn't have to say anything to me about being upset. But so I began messaging her. I began commenting, and yeah, I think this might have been live. This part might have been live, but it was the end of the video, and I began commenting on her video, and I remember I commented, and I stopped, and I said, no, don't comment publicly. Send her a private message, and I did, and she didn't respond. So I went back to the video after it was the live stream was finished, and I commented because she was responding to people's comments, and I explained to her, listen, this wasn't racist. This was really black people organizing for themselves, just needing a space where they could get together and talk amongst themselves without outside people, where they'd be comfortable, where they could say whatever they needed to say, where they could organize and strategize without having people all in their business. It wasn't racial. This wasn't racist. And at the time when I'm telling her this, I didn't even know who the organizers of the session were, because again, I didn't go Saturday. I was there Sunday, so I wasn't at the session on Saturday. But I knew that this was not a situation where a bunch of black people just didn't want. They were just blocking white people from coming into their session. So she doesn't really respond to me. I go back through the program, through the UNAC program, and I see that the session is arranged by Black Alliance for Peace. Black Alliance for Peace is Ajamu Baraka's organization. Now, if you are a progressive, even if you are not a Green Party progressive, if you don't know who Ajamu Baraka is, you should look him up. Just Google him real quick. You'll be able to find out who he is very quickly. And I hope that explains or immediately gives you an idea of how sketchy the accusation of racism against Claudia in that session is. So I still thought she really just doesn't understand. She just doesn't understand. So I'm gonna try to dialogue with her. I'm still gonna try to explain to her because she's still reinforcing the idea that she was mistreated because of the color of her skin. She wasn't allowed to live stream because she's white. There was a black lady who was in the room who was allowed to live stream. That wasn't fair. So for a couple of days, and you've seen many of you have seen the back and forth on the videos that came from Claudia and then that came from Debbie Luzignan in support of Claudia. And before our comments were deleted and then we were blocked from their social media profiles, many of us did, because I thought that, okay, maybe I am not explaining it right, because she's ignoring me. Both of them are ignoring me, and now their supporters are coming after me saying hateful things to me. I'm trying to explain to them that it's not racist. No one's listening to me. And then, of course, people get wind of what's going on, and other people become involved in the conversation. But at no point during this first couple of days, which is 2 days after the conference, um, it needs to be noted that when Claudia made her video accusing Black Alliance for Peace of conducting a racist workshop because it was closed to people who were not of African descent, and for not allowing her to stream, but for allowing a black lady to stream. That video was posted, that live stream was done 2 days after the workshop. I didn't know that. I hadn't made that connection when I began trying to talk to her, trying to address her concerns. But as the days went on, I really had to step back and think, wait, hold on. Not only did she not talk to me when we were at the conference, she didn't reach out to Ajamu Baraka. He was right there. I talked to him. I talked to him at length. And still, as the days go on, these conversations are getting more and more heated. People's comments are being deleted. People are being blocked. Black people and white people who are trying to explain to Claudia and Debbie why this session was not racist and why her not being allowed to stream was also not racist. And still, we are met with resistance. We are met with insistence that this was just racist and it was wrong, and there was no place for it at a peace conference. There was no place for it at an anti-war conference. It wasn't right. Everything we said fell on deaf ears. Then we find out that Claudia tweeted something that said, I asked 10 white people if they had heard of safe spaces, and they all said no. She tweeted that. And that was used as a way for her to justify saying that safe spaces for black people were invalid and unnecessary because 10 white people had never heard of safe spaces. So we try really hard not to get personal. I didn't comment on Claudia's and Debbie's videos and posts because I had anything personal against them. I commented on their posts because what they were saying was incorrect, it was inflammatory, and if there were concerns about the way that session was conducted on Saturday at the conference, the way they went about expressing their concern was absolutely the wrong way. It was unfair to the attendees of the workshop. It was unfair to Ajamu Baraka. It was unfair to progressives in general. This is not how we hold each other accountable if we have a problem with each other. I can understand making a social media post and calling Bernie Sanders out because you don't like what he's doing, because you don't know Bernie Sanders. You have no relationship with Bernie Sanders. You can't contact him. You can't email Bernie Sanders and expect Bernie Sanders to email you back. But for us in the independent journalist commentator world, Ajamu Baraka is not a hands-off, distant kind of person. I kind of figure that if I can go to a conference on Sunday and he sees me sit in the audience and he waves, and at the end of the panel discussion he comes down off the little dais things and gives me a hug and says, I'm so glad to see you and how have you been, and we can have a conversation. If I have that much access to him, and I'm just Jacqueline Lukman here in Lukman Nation, how is it that Claudia Stauber didn't have access to him? Especially when Debbie Luzignan did interview him before the workshop. So it was very problematic that this concern was aired publicly, this grievance, this accusation of racism against black people, discriminating against a white woman, was aired publicly. And the people who were at the center of the accusation weren't given a chance to defend themselves. That was wrong. And that's why we responded. We, meaning myself And then I can't remember if I asked Anoa Shanga, hey, have you heard this? Or if someone else told her. But then she started to try to explain black spaces and why this session was set up the way it was, and there was no malicious intent on our part, but we began to suspect that this wasn't just an oversight, an accident, a lack of understanding, as Claudia kept saying that it was. Because as the days wore on, we began to find out other things. People who were in attendance at the conference began to reach out to me mostly, and to Anoa also, but to me because I was there. And they reached out to me because I was there, because I live streamed much of the Sunday session and some of the other activities. So people start telling me that after the workshop, Debbie and Claudia went to lunch with the organizers of the workshop, with some of the organizers of the workshop, and that included the black lady who was live streaming the session. They went to lunch with them that day after the workshop, during which Claudia was allegedly discriminated against because she was white. She went to lunch with the people who allegedly discriminated against her. Then I find out that the woman who live streamed the session was designated to do that because she's a member of Black Alliance for Peace, and she was live streaming the session to Black Alliance for Peace's Facebook page. Because, see, people who organize workshops and conferences have every right to control the content, who captures the content, and where that content is published. Even though I registered as a member of the media when I attended the UNAC conference, I made sure to ask at the registration table, is it okay if I live stream the sessions and the conference and the speeches to our page? I don't assume that I can automatically do these things, especially when I see that the organization that is putting on the conference is doing their own live streaming. So we find this out, and then we begin to confront Claudia with these things that we are finding out that don't jibe with what she had been saying about not understanding racism and not realizing that it was a black only space until she walked into the room. It was actually published on the program, and this was one workshop out of 16 workshops. The other 2 days, Friday and Saturday, all of the panel discussions, the public panel discussions, were broken up into um, topics of discussion that centered around war as it impacts certain groups of people and certain countries, like the impact of war on the disabled in America, or the impact of war on Asians in the Philippines, or the impact of war in the Congo. And for people in Black Alliance for Peace, in that session, they were talking about the impact of war, not only internationally on the continent of Africa, which doesn't get talked about much when we talk about being anti-war, because most of these conferences and meetings are dominated and attended heavily by white people. And that's not an accusation of any kind, that's just the truth. So the conversation is centered around war as it impacts people who aren't black. There's a lot of talk about Syria, there's a lot of talk about the Middle East, there's a lot of talk about what happened from the Vietnam War. There's a lot of talk about World War III, but you don't get a lot of talk about the ongoing war in the Congo and the United States' role in perpetuating that war. There's not a lot of talk about the hundreds of military bases that are practically cutting the continent of Africa in half. There's not a lot of talk about the role of ROTC units in high schools in predominantly black neighborhoods that are a part of an effort that we've seen for years to funnel our children into the war machine. These are the kinds of topics that were discussed in this workshop that Black Alliance for Peace arranged. And while it was absolutely true that it was advertised that it was specifically for people of African descent, um, it is actually not true that white people were not allowed in. That was our preference. Well, that was their preference, I should say. But and that there are reasons for that. But it's not true that people were not allowed into the room. And I'll show you how I know that's true.
I would just like to know a little bit more about Colombia that you mentioned.
Okay, we're not going to go into that too much right now.
Right.
We'll come back, and I would encourage you to come to the plenary that Charles is going to be discussing that in more detail. I want to just kind of make sure we just have any questions related to sort of the broad contours of this alliance.
She was next.
Oh, okay.
Sister
Good morning.
Now, as you can see, as you could hear in the uh, audio, I hope you could hear that. That's Claudia Stauber asking a question in this workshop. So she wasn't denied entry, and she didn't seem to be uncomfortable to me. And I'm going to make a reference to her body language because when I tried dialoguing with her, she made a reference to my body language and said that my body language during a session, an open session, the discussion session, where she and Debbie were making comments, was aggressive. That is a loaded statement to make for many historical reasons. But since we're on the topic of body language, I want you to notice that there are actually two white people in this room. One of them is Claudia Stauber, right there, sitting quite comfortably, doesn't seem to be upset. She seems to be listening intently to this gentleman who is asking a question. And there's this guy right here behind her. I don't know who he is, but he's certainly white, and he's certainly in that room. So this was not a situation where Black Alliance for Peace denied entry to the session to white people. So we are coming now to the point at which I realize there's no reasoning with her. There's no. I've tried to explain why the session was closed to people of African or closed to people who were not of African descent. We Every other group of people has a right to organize without outside interference and worrying about who will take what away from the meeting and misconstrue it and leak their information and leak their plans. Everyone else gets to organize in private. It's only ever a problem when black people do it. And if you know anything about history, you know that's true. But I understood that perhaps Claudia just doesn't understand because she hasn't been in the country long. You've seen all of those, all of those comments. I'm not going to rehash them here. What I am going to say is that as much as this initial incident bothered me a great deal, and it did bother me a great deal, that black people who were attending a conference and sitting in a workshop trying to learn and organize around building the anti-war effort as it pertains specifically to black people, not just in this country, but around the world, because we've lost that focus in the black community. We've lost that focus. I was deeply concerned that this workshop was characterized as racist by Claudia Stauber, and Debbie Luzignan began to support her in her comments. But I became more concerned, much more concerned, with the amount of hatred and vitriol and real racism that began to be directed toward me, Anoa Shanga, other black people, other white people who were trying to dialogue with them on our personal pages, on our social media outlet pages, on our it. We've received some really nasty comments, really vile and nasty comments, and we didn't see a lot of. There were no attempts by either Claudia or Debbie to encourage their followers to change or tone down their language toward us. We were blocked, we were insulted, um, and ultimately we were ignored. Now, here's the other part of this that portends, I think, doom almost for the progressive movement. And this is why I'm even having this discussion with you today, because it has been the way that those influential personalities in the progressive information movement have responded to this incident. Now, as I've said before in another stream, and I'm saying right now again, and I will always, always contend that this is true. This didn't have to happen. It didn't have to happen, but I absolutely believe that it was intentionally done. Because had there been any concerns with anything that was done at that conference, could have been addressed that weekend, could have been addressed that day. Instead, a public accusation of racism is leveled against people 2 days later. And that accusation is upheld, it's stuck to, people defend it, and the more we try to explain how harmful this is, not just to us personally, because it was harm, it was hurtful personally, but it was also very harmful to the progressive movement. Because this week was when I realized, like I said, we can't even agree on ground rules here. We can agree that we all have to be frightened and concerned about climate change. We're all expected to believe in climate change. We're all expected to believe and get behind reproductive rights. We're all expected to believe in and get behind the fight for 15. We are all expected to believe in and get behind rooting big money out of politics. We're all expected to oppose fracking. But somehow we're split on racism in the progressive movement. That's a thing we can't decide on. Somehow we can't decide to stand up against malicious and false accusations of racism, and to stand up in defense of people who are being attacked with racial insults and sly racial innuendos, like questioning my body language, saying that it's aggressive. I'm gonna stop just telling you that that's what was said, and I'm going to try to show you what I'm talking about here.
And they're spraying us with aluminum, strontium, barium. There is science. It's not a conspiracy. It's even been in the mainstream media. So I would urge this panel in the next meeting to really truly address the war that is waged on almost 8 billion people. And it doesn't matter what color, what religion, where you're from, where you live in the world, it's on every single one of you. And the reason there is sicknesses on the rise like Alzheimer's is because aluminum is being sprayed in nanoparticulate form.
That was my aggressive body language. That was the body language that I was told was aggressive and offensive. And as a black woman who understands the history of black people in this country and how everything we do is criminalized, everything we do is made to be threatening or evil or malicious, I understand how dangerous a statement that is. Because you see, fear of black people, fear of black people's aggression, believing that black people are naturally aggressive is what gets us killed by the police and anyone else who has a gun who says, I was in fear for my life, I was standing my ground. But even at this point, when I was insulted personally like that, I thought, she just doesn't understand. And I continued to try to dialogue with her. But the thing that concerned me the most was to see the influential people in the progressive movement, those who share and spread and influence ideas, information, how instead of holding her and Debbie to the same standard of integrity that they would hold Bernie Sanders or John Ossoff or Nina Turner, they instead insisted that we apologize. They instead insisted that there was no malicious intent and we just need to unite. There was no addressing the initial offense. There was actually no asking what happened. There was just an automatic coming to the defense of two people who have pretty sizable social media platforms. They have a pretty sizable social media footprint in the progressive movement. And this is the thing that has concerned me for quite a while among these people who are influential in the social media information outlets. There's this strain of opportunism that people pursue over everything. Getting the next big person on your live stream, getting that next big interview, making sure you align yourself with the people who can grow your page. While we're holding public politicians accountable for sheepdogging people into the Democratic Party or being traitors because they're trying to reform the Democratic Party, these very same people won't hold progressives in this movement accountable for very questionable, very inflammatory, very harmful actions of an incredibly dangerous racial aspect. I've seen people all week say that this is not a big deal. Why are you wasting your time on this? You should be focusing on healthcare. Why aren't you focusing on Syria? The one thing we have asked for, we being black people, have asked for is support in fighting for issues that pertain to and are important to our lives. And in doing that, one of the things we need is a safe space to organize, plan, just release. But because someone felt that it was their right to not only gain entry to that space, but to broadcast what was going on in that meeting for their benefit, then our right and need for that space has now become invalid in their eyes. And instead of those independent media progressive personalities coming to the defense of the people who need the most help, fighting for our issues, we were told that our issues don't matter as much as those progressive personalities with the big platforms. This is why I'm having this conversation with you tonight. Because once again, black people have been told by some well meaning white liberals, progressives, however you want to call it, but I suggest you go back and read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the Birmingham jail, because this is exactly what he was talking about. Once again, black people have been betrayed by people we've allowed into that sacred space, that little bit of space that we carve out for ourselves to build a foundation for our own future and to strategize on how we can make that future work for everyone else. Our sacred space was turned against us again. And the people who have been saying that they're for Black Lives Matter, wouldn't stand up for Black truth this time. That's a problem. It had gotten to the point where people who are Green Party candidates for Senate are posting comments referencing a incredibly racist story character in trying to explain, not really explain why we shouldn't question or we shouldn't challenge the way this situation was handled by Stauber and Lusignan. Not only were we told that we had no right to challenge them because we don't have 25 years in the movement, our resume isn't long enough for us to have a right to demand integrity and honesty from the people we're supposed to be fighting with. But not only that, he tried to give us a value lesson using the Tar Baby story. We're not making any of this stuff up. And if me posting people's screenshots of people's public posts bothers you, if you think it's petty, consider this. Every single day of my life as a Black person in America, I have to consider who I am going to have to apologize to, or what I'm going to have to do to make sure I don't offend someone by talking too loud or laughing too loud or being too passionate about a topic I'm discussing, or for standing with my hand on my hip, or for sitting listening to people make comments at a conference because I am afraid that people are going to think that I am aggressive and they are going to treat me badly because of it. That's every day for me. And for Black men, and now increasingly more Black women, it's not just who's going to hurt my feelings or mistreat me because they think I'm aggressive. No, it's literally, is someone going to kill me because they think me walking down the street with some Skittles and some iced tea is a threat? So for anyone this week to have said to myself or Anoa Shanga or anyone else who has tried to dialogue with these people, and explain to them what the problem was and why what was done was so upsetting and so damaging and so dangerous, if anyone responds to me with, well, look, you just need to move on and unite, I need you to understand. We need you to understand. We, the black contingent of the progressive movement, need you to understand that there is no unity among progressives if you will not hear black voices. And if you will choose to defend the bad behavior, very, very bad, and what I believe to be absolutely intentionally manipulative behavior of your favorite progressive personalities because they butter your bread, because you sharing content with them or them coming on your page is good for your bottom line. You benefit from the monetization of your YouTube videos because when they come on your page, more people watch. Or because you think that because you've had 25 years of activism, that you have more of a right to talk about what is and is not racially insensitive than I do, we will never win another election for anything at any level running on purely progressive politics if we can't even decide that we will not tolerate racism, overt or covert, intentional or unintentional. We will never move ahead as progressives if we will not decide that we will not co sign on or excuse the bad behavior of people who make accusations and claims against people in public that they refuse to acknowledge when they're challenged on them, and that they won't take excuse me, responsibility for when they're proven to be false. The session at the UNAC conference in Richmond that the Black Alliance for Peace arranged was not racist. Claudia Stauber was not kept from streaming because she was white. She wasn't allowed to stream because the woman who was streaming was designated to do that to the BAP Facebook page specifically. They have a right to control their content and where it's published. Excuse me. But it's awfully interesting that as angry as Claudia and Debbie were 2 days after this conference, they weren't so angry at the racist black people in that room that they didn't go to lunch with them that day. Continuing with this narrative that what was done to Debbie that what was done to Claudia in Richmond was racist and it was wrong is dangerous. It's wrong. It's absolutely malicious to continue to double down or completely ignore it, but it is also dangerous because those are the kinds of accusations that white people have made that have cost black people their lives, our livelihoods, our security. And in this instance, this accusation and the way some white progressives have responded to it have cost you our trust. Our trust was violated here. In good faith, they were allowed into this workshop. In good faith. And they took that good faith and smeared people who were kind to them, who were open to them, who broke bread with them. And for what? Why? To stay relevant? Is this the progressive movement? Is it more important to you that your favorite personality's feelings aren't hurt when they're challenged on their bad behavior? Is that more important to you than standing up for the integrity and the honesty and the accountability that you demand from politicians? Because if your favorite progressive personalities aren't held to that same standard, then you may take my ticket, my membership in this progressive movement, and you may set it on fire. Because as a Black woman who's been involved in political and community activism for 20 years, I will tell you this day that I am tired of being thrown under the bus for the self aggrandizement of opportunistic white people who see no problem with violating our spaces, violating our information, violating our privacy, and violating our trust for their benefit. If we want, as progressives, to be united, we have to stop pretending that we don't understand racism. Yes, you do. You understand racism very well. Not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to face it, and not wanting to admit that racism exists, even in progressive circles, is not the same thing as not understanding it. And if you don't understand it, for those of you who really, truly, honestly don't understand it, that's fabulous. Here is my advice for you. Ask questions. Ask us. Yes, we are fighting for our lives. Every day we are fighting for our lives. But if you are really interested in fighting for us, fighting with us, rather, really fighting with us, because we don't need you to do this for us. We would really love it if you would fight with us. If you're really interested in doing that, you will ask us, why is this done this way? I don't understand it. That's how you achieve unity. In closing, my husband and I were invited to a sweat lodge by a Native American historian, local Native American historian, and radio personality, a man I respect greatly. We went to the sweat lodge and we were told that we couldn't live stream, we couldn't take pictures, and my husband wanted to help with some of the setup, but he was told that he couldn't participate in that because that was something that Native men traditionally do, and only Native men could do it. Do you know what our response was? Okay, okay. We waited to be given instructions and directions for what we could do, where we were supposed to go, how we were supposed to do it, and we had one of the most amazing experiences we have ever had in our lives. And during that experience, we asked questions. Well, why can't we participate in this part? Well, why can't we live stream? Why can't we take pictures? And in doing that, that's how we learned more about a culture we didn't understand, asking those questions. And through asking those questions and having those conversations, that is how we achieved unity. That is how we achieve unity. Not by acting as if racism doesn't exist. Not by acting as if there was not a problem and an egregious breach of trust of Black people. Not by acting as if some people in this movement are more important than others, so their voices are more valuable than others. That's not how we unify. You demanding that I unify with you while I ignore the offense committed against me. That's not unity. That's fascism. And I thought that's what we were fighting against. If we're not, if that's not what this progressive movement is, let me know. But if this is not what you want your progressive movement to be, stop making empty pleas for unity and actually take the time to have the hard conversations to get some understanding so that we can truly be united. Thanks for joining me tonight, you guys. I appreciate it. You can see my husband and I on Saturday afternoons over at Coffee, Current Events, and Politics and Luke Mon Nation live at 6 p.m. I will be streaming here on We Are the Media at least once a week. I appreciate this very, very much. And over on Brick by Brick and Luke Mon Nation, I actually am going to begin a series where we're going to talk about this thing called racism. So stay tuned for broadcasts from there that will air on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. All times are Eastern. Find us on YouTube, Luke Mon Nation, Luqman. Thank you all very much for joining me. Be really good to each other.